week I was sitting at 5 a.m. On the couch attempting to read, and I always told my students at school there's two kinds of Mr. Barrett. There's before coffee Mr. Barrett and after coffee Mr. Barrett. And the before coffee Mr. Barrett, I've only ever taught him how to make coffee. So anything other than that is not fair game for him. And a few times the before coffee Mr. Barrett has tried to drive to school, and I've made it to school, and I don't know how I got there. And to me, that's a miracle. So I decided, hey, well, I'm going to talk about miracles today because I have a Bible study, and I was reading it this week. I was sitting on the couch eating my breakfast and stuff, and reading this, and it was really conflicting for me to look at the times in my life that something incredible has happened to me or happened to someone that I know, and then I just shrugged it off and gone, oh, this happened and all the different circumstances came together to make something, when I really should have been giving thanks instead. And it's kind of funny that during a lot of our prayer time, I was noticing that there are a lot of miracles going on around us and to all of us, and so I thought I would kind of explore how all of this relates to our story as believers. So first of all, if you have a Bible, the first verse that I'll be looking at is Luke 18, 22 through 27. Right there. So if you want to find that one, you can. While you're doing that, I have a little tiny bit of a story to begin with. Now, there's so many miraculous things that have happened to me and around the people around me. I really didn't know where to go with this at first. When I was reading the Bible study message, that kind of just hit me right where it hurts and went, oh, you need to talk about miracles. The first thing I thought was, well, where do I begin? And so I picked what I think is probably the shortest story to start us off. So you're welcome. I used to go on mission trips to Mexico a lot with a church in Canby Christian Church. We had what we called the Spring Break Mexico Missions Trip. Now the high school went on another trip called the High School Summer Mexico Missions Trip, and I think they did something different. They built houses or something with more ministries. And so we decided, meaning a friend of mine named Brandon and I, decided to create a trip that was a little bit different than that, where we would go and partner with the church. So we found a mission organization over there. It was called Go Missions to Mexico, which is, you might be thinking, well, you just Googled Go Missions to Mexico and you came up with them. That's exactly what happened, actually. They were the first thing that popped up. But it's run by a family. A guy named Mike decided to go down to Mexico in his, I believe, mid-40s. His family was really young. They went down, they built this complex in Mexico, and they decided to begin partnering with churches over there and bringing American short-term missions teams to Mexico for only about a week to 2 weeks. And in that week to 2 weeks, a team will be able to help said church renovate or build their church building. They'll also be able to partner with that church in going door to door and witnessing to people in those communities where they're at. And then they'll also be able to do outreaches. Now, when I said door to door, you automatically thought of several other faiths that do the same thing. And how could we go over there and do the same thing that people are doing here that annoys the heck out of us? Well, let me tell you. So over there in Mexico, there's a different thing about that. A lot of people don't have doors. It's a tarp. And so the door means the gates. You go to the gate. There's a gate there. There's usually a lot of very rabid-looking dogs, so you don't want to go in the gate. You just want to stand there and say Buenos dias really politely until someone finally comes out or someone tells you to go away, either way. And so you stand there, and usually, it's kind of funny, people see all the white people standing around these translators and things, and they go, that's interesting, and they'll come out. So they come halfway out, and then you get to start a conversation with them. It works perfectly every time. They'll go, what are these, really tall white people doing here? And so this was happening. This was my first year on the trip, and I was 19 years old, and I decided to do this and go on this trip that was just planted and things like that at that church. And everything was running very smoothly. We had the first day of, we built on their church. We had some cementing projects to cement the floor of the church that we were working with. And then we also went door to door and did some missions and that kind of stuff, prayed with some people. It was really starting to make an impact in my life. Because over here in the U.S., like I said, if you try to knock on someone's door, they're going to probably not open it at all. They'll look kind of through the window and then they won't open it at all. But over there, it's a big deal. Like, they'll come to the gate, they want to talk to you and things, and they love being prayed for. It was kind of life-changing for me. But the week was going still inside my comfort zone. That was still, believe it or not, in my comfort zone, and we were having a couple outreaches per night. We had like a youth night, we had a little kids night, and that kind of stuff, and those were still inside my comfort zone. And Mike's son, the son of the guy that planted the mission team building, he actually came to me one day and said, "Hey, great news, the church really loves what you're doing. Do you guys have time tonight to come back for another outreach?" And I said, "Sure, that sounds like a great idea." And he said, "Okay, bring all the high school kids, and we have this outreach. It's not going to be at the church, it's going to be at this other place. We'll give you kind of the address of where it is," which address is in Mexico, or I learned very misleading, so it was about 3 blocks from the address it should have been at, but it was this vacant lot where kids played soccer and people hung out and that kind of thing. But I didn't know it was in the rough part of town. You failed to mention that. So we were on the way and we start driving and stuff, and we pass the friendly community that we've been ministering to, and we get to this community where there's broken glass in every window, and there's barbed wire fencing and stuff, and there's like keep out signs in Spanish and things, and even more scary looking dogs. And the first time I actually saw a dog on a roof. There was a dog, like a big dog, about yay tall, on a roof, and I walked by and whoa, and there's a dog on a roof, and I figured, well, he probably won't jump off to try and kill me, so I'm fine. But I've never seen a dog on a roof before. When I took Carrie Ann a few years later, she saw, "Did you see one of those too? A dog on a roof?" Yeah, there are dogs on roofs in Mexico. Anyway, so but we're on the way to this vacant lot, and I'm starting to get a little nervous because this is not part of town I'm familiar with. In fact, there were high school kids sitting right near me, and they're like, "Hey, Jeff, this looks a little rough." And I was like, "Oh, it's good. You know, it looks like that on the surface, but we'll be fine." So we get to this vacant lot. Turns out it was a concert. So the guy that I was talking to, he had a band, and this band was like a Christian metal band. Spanish Christian metal band, and they're warming up and stuff, and it sounds hardcore, like, yeah, you know. And we get there, and we start going, "Okay, so what do you want us to do?" And he hadn't told me he wanted me to speak at it. Really would have been helpful information, right? And so he said, "Oh yeah, well, you know, in 15 minutes in Mexico is 30 minutes. So in 30 minutes, we want you to speak at this thing." And I went, "Okay," and so I'm thumbing through my Bible and stuff, and I don't notice people start showing up. So a whole bunch of people show up. Eventually we packed out this vacant lot. And it was great, and everybody started worshiping. I had no idea that these were worship songs, that just like heavy metal worship songs, but okay, sure. And all these kids start, praying and that kind of thing, and it was a lot of fun. It gets to the time where I need to speak. So I get up onto the stage, and the stage is, it was very tall, and there was no ladder, so it was kind of hard getting up there, but it was about, I would say, 5 feet off the ground, and without a ladder. So finally I got up there, and there's no, anything to keep you from falling, so I kind of stepped back from the edge. And then, after I've got all my notes together, and I've got my Bible and everything, I take a look up, and what I saw scared the pants off me. There was, now in that part, at least in that part of Mexico that we were at, there was a very prevalent street gang. And they wore blue bandanas, and they wore black gloves. So whenever you saw someone with black gloves on their hands, whether it was leather or cloth or whatever, and then blue bandanas, that was the gang of the area, and they kind of ran everything. And so we had encountered them once or twice before and that kind of stuff. They would always kind of hang a little bit around where we were talking, but they never really wanted to talk to us. And so it was just, it was fine. There were approximately 35 to 40 of them in the back of where everybody was standing, and they had bandanas on. And when we were told by the missionary there, we were told, hey, if you ever see their bandanas on their face, you need to get out of that area because something's going on. They don't want to be found out, that kind of stuff. They just don't want. They don't want their identity to be known. And usually we had the option of leaving in that respect, but this time, of course, we didn't. I'm on a 5-foot stage and I'm looking out, and their bandanas are on, and as I begin to talk, literally the first sentence that came out of my mouth, of course there was someone translating in Spanish next to me, but the first sentence out of my mouth, they looked at each other kind of like this, shoulder to shoulder, they started advancing toward the stage, slowly. Oh, it was creepy. And I was standing there, trying not to sweat and acting like I was okay. And pretty soon I noticed I was talking directly at them. Not wanting to, trying to talk over everybody's heads, but I was talking to them. And I was talking about grace. And I was thinking, hopefully you'll have the grace not to do anything in this circumstance, even though for some reason you don't like me. So they were advancing step by step. They got all the way through the crowd. They picked their way through the crowd. As soon as people saw that they were there, they went, kind of just let them pass. They got to the front of the stage, and there they stood, looking at me the entire time. Anyway, the kids that were with me, they had a skit that they were going to do too, and they, for some reason, did not notice these guys, so it was all good. They came up and did their skit. I was the only one that was nervous. And they got done with their skit and stuff. Guys are still there, still standing, looking at us on the stage. They all get done, and the service kind of winds to a close. I did not get off the stage when the band played the last song because they were surrounding the foot of the stage. And when we finally went to get off the stage, they let me down, and some people are going away, and people are milling around. The gang was still surrounding the stage at about, 2 feet from the stage, shoulder to shoulder, completely surrounding us. There was nowhere to go. There was a fence in the back. So I get off the stage. And when I get off, I am standing now face to face with, I think, a 6'5", 300-pound man with a bandana on his face. And he immediately points to the pastor of the church that we were witnessing at, and he motions him over because he knew I did not speak his language. And so the pastor comes over and starts standing right near him and that kind of thing. Hesitantly, by the way, the pastor kind of went, oh boy, and standing right near him, I am just about ready to wet myself. I'm standing there going, oh, and really clenching, and the guy standing right face to face with me. Eventually, all the rest of the gang surrounds myself, my friend Brandon, and this pastor, and it's this circle, this huddle of gang members and us. And the guy standing and talking to me, I didn't know what he was saying until the pastor interpreted it for me. He took down his bandana, and I was thinking, I hope this is a good sign, right? He takes it down, and he says something that I still don't understand. He had an angry look through the whole thing. Everybody had an angry look. They were staring us down through the whole thing. And he says the words, myself and my friends would like to know about this Jesus you're talking about and how we can become his friend too. That to me, I did not do anything to merit this. I didn't say anything that was, I guess, provocative enough for them to have come to that. That to me is called a miracle. This week I was reading about miracles, and I was reading about how not only are they something that completely affects our lives in new and crazy ways, but we are sort of overthinking them a little bit. At least I am overthinking mine. So this is what the verse of the day kind of says, the beginning verse of the day, Luke 18:22 through 27. Now this is after when Jesus was talking to a rich man, and this might also, if you have a Bible, it might read Jesus talks to the rich man or something like that. This rich man wanted to know what he could do to inherit the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus said, there's still one thing you haven't done. Sell all your possessions and give all your money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then, come, follow me. He didn't say, by the way, at the beginning there, it wasn't his works that were going to save him. Giving his money away was just simply a good thing. He said, after that, and you will have treasure in heaven, then come follow me. Now the next part's kind of sad. I think I missed a part. I left off a part. I'm sorry. So there's a verse in the middle that says that the rich man, when he heard this, he was very sad because he was very rich. And he starts to walk away. When Jesus saw this, he said, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. In fact, It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. And of course, everybody around him at this point probably went, whoa, that's a pretty big statement to make. Those who heard this said, then who in the world can be saved? Because even though there were poor areas that Jesus walked through, there were definitely more wealthy areas as well. And of course, you and I are the most wealthy of the wealthy in the world, even if we don't feel like it in our own country. I don't have to give you the percentages. You probably heard them before. We're in the upper percentages of the world in terms of wealth. He said in verse 27, the verse that has stuck with me the entire week, what is impossible for people is possible with God. I'll say that again to let that sink in. What is impossible for people is possible with God. That is a statement that not only, I think, refers to this story, which has, to me at first, it had nothing to do with miracles. But I've always wondered, in that moment when that guy was standing right in front of me, and I was reviewing every bad decision I'd ever made in my life that had brought me to this situation. I was thinking to myself, this has to be a miracle. That man wanted to come to know Jesus. And in verse 27, it says, what is impossible for people is possible with God. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. The fact that miracles aren't necessarily things that are unexplained by science, unexplained by medicine. There's no other reason this could have happened than if an angel had come and that. Actually, if you think about it, miracles are everywhere, all the time, every day. And this week, I have actually been able to see that in myself. But I'll talk about myself a little bit later. I was reading with you, there's an author named Eugene Peterson. He wrote The Message. The Message is a version of the Bible, I don't know if you know, that kind of gives a little bit more of a readable, I guess, translation of Scripture. There are some people, biblical scholars included, and a few friends of mine that have gone through Bible school that say, oh, that's the worst translation of the Bible. And I always come back at them and say, but how many people have actually come to know Jesus because they read something that sort of reads like a novel? It really does. I've been able to read the entire Bible just using the Message, just because it reads so fluidly. But this is what Eugene Peterson, the author of The Message, says about miracles. When something happens we can't explain, we say that's a miracle. Under that set of definitions, most thing that a magician does up on a stage is also a miracle, isn't it? And I know good and well that it's not a miracle. A miracle, through the biblical translation, is not what we don't understand, but what is done for us that we can't do ourselves. That's huge. A miracle is functional. It's what God does for us, or does through us, or through other people, that we can't do ourselves. That's interesting, isn't it? When I looked up the definition of miracle this morning, just because I was curious, I was wondering, has the definition changed throughout history or something like that? Turns out it has. It just changed recently, in fact. I don't know how many years ago it changed, but just recently, and in the 20th or 21st century, the definition of miracle changed to that which cannot be explained by science or medical reasons, and therefore is attributed to a deity. Now, to echo this, Stephen Hawking, who just died, was regarded by a lot of people to be one of the most brilliant men who ever lived, said this: "We are just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet of a very strange and average star. But we can't understand but we can understand the universe. That makes us somewhat special." That's the most demotivational thing I've ever heard. Really. And this guy gave speeches at Harvard. Okay. He also said this, and I think this is really telling about his perspective. Religion believes in miracles, but these aren't compatible with science. Because with science, we understand the known laws of the universe. Those are the true miracles. Okay. The funny thing about that, I think, is that laws of science, laws that we know of, were made by us, technically, right? We observed something, and we went, how is that possible? And we did a bunch of tests. And we got everybody together in a room and puzzled over it, and we did more tests. And then finally, we learned that this is an absolute truth of nature. This thing happens. And we said, all right, that's a law. And now we've gotten so many of them that we actually look down on miracle. And we say to ourselves, oh, no, that just happened. The sun comes up every morning. In fact, it doesn't come up. We are spinning around it. And the only reason that we're still on this planet is because of the size and the fact that we're held down and stuff like that. Things that, people that didn't know as much as us referred to as miracles. Well, the funny thing is this week, I was thinking about this very thing, and I was thinking, I had a science teacher in high school that said exactly the same thing. And a student stood up in this science class, not me, I wasn't as brave as this, but a student stood up in class, a Christian, and said, okay, then if all these rules are supposed to explain everything that happens in nature and that the sun coming up in the morning is not a miracle, who started the sun coming up in the morning? And the science teacher said, well, and went back into the theory and that kind of stuff. And the kid let him go on this tangent and things and went, okay. Isn't it interesting that your brain can comprehend that that's exactly what happens? It all had to have a start. It's kind of funny that at the start, we keep coming up with new and more grandiose theories to explain something that is most easily explained by someone doing it themselves. And the science teacher didn't have anything to say at that point. But I think that's funny. And I've done this myself. I've done so much to actually bring laws of nature and, oh, that's just chance and that kind of stuff. And when the sun coming up every morning is a miracle in itself. And for me this week, that just changed everything. So, I also wanted to tell you about something that has happened in our lives just recently. So, in everyday life, miracles, like I said, can look like other acts of nature, random acts of chance, that kind of thing. I want to tell you a story about something that is not chance at all. In about August, September, Carrie Ann and I were struggling financially. I have her permission to talk about this, don't worry. As we were struggling financially, there were a few times, obviously we didn't tell anybody about this. We didn't act as if there was anything wrong. The problem was that we were waiting for her to get hired by a school district. And while I have a teaching job that does pay me throughout the year, it doesn't pay exactly that much, and it's one income. And it began to shrink the ability to do things, finally the ability to pay bills, finally the ability to buy food. And one day I was sitting in the basement of our house. Our house has a very large basement, and I was doing the finances, and I was looking at all the expenditures and things that needed to happen and stuff. And I looked at the bank account, and things did not add up for about the 12th time. And this had happened to us earlier in our marriage, but I was thinking, gosh, now we were in such a better position. I have such a far better job than I used to, and how is this still happening? And was there anything that we could cut? We cut everything we could possibly cut. And one day she went off to go teach a swimming lesson, and I sat there and I started crying. I started bawling. And I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know it was affecting me this way. I just started crying my eyes out one day. And I was sitting there just emptying myself of tears. And finally I got done. And I realized that a whole 5 minutes had gone by. And I had just been crying for 5 minutes straight. And I looked up and I went, oh my goodness, I didn't know this was affecting me this way. And I started praying as I had never prayed before. My prayers had been angry. My prayers had almost been vindictive of God, if you really love me, why don't you, that kind of prayer, right? And I started accusing God of not coming through when I needed him to come through. I was talking about my plan. I was laying it out on his table in his drawing room of the universe and saying, God, look, this is what you need to do. And I had so many ideas and so many things and so many ways that this could come about and stuff, and I could sell the car and I could do this, and why don't you let any of this happen? But every time I raised a hand to do something, nothing would happen. Absolutely nothing would happen. And a few days went by, a few weeks. After I started praying the kinds of prayers that said, God, I need you, I don't know how this is going to happen. All of a sudden, things began to occur which were There was a day, and I still have the statement from it. There was a day where I read the bank statement, I copied it down onto a spreadsheet, and I looked at it and went, oh, goodness, and I walked away. Hours later, I came back. I realized there was a bill I needed to pay. I didn't know if I had enough money to do that. I went to the computer. I opened it up. I looked at the spreadsheet. The number was the same. I looked and opened up the bank account. I had $120 more. I did. It was exactly $120 to pay this bill. I can't make this kind of stuff up. There were a few other days where people didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden, someone shows up to our door. A friend shows up to our door. They have a whole bunch of fruits and vegetables for us. I didn't tell anybody about that. One day, my mom found a sale at Costco, which means buy everything, and she bought a whole bunch. We hadn't told them, by the way. And she comes to the door, and she has about 5 pounds of ground beef. I had just run out of meat that day, that morning, in fact. We ran out of meat that morning. She brings 5 pounds of hamburger around noon. How? How on earth? Now, I could explain that through chance. I could go, she had extra. It just kind of falls into place. But I kid you not, as soon as things started working out, as soon as we started getting more jobs, as soon as more opportunities became available, and money started rolling in, those kind of things stopped completely. It was as if God knew exactly when it needed to happen, where it needed to happen, and exactly how much. And I could go on for about 30 minutes, which you don't have, talking about those times in just September when this kind of stuff happened. And so now, every morning, especially this week, I've been driving to school and going, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know when we have a baby, if finances will just start tanking. I don't want to see that medical bill that a lot of you have seen when you've had kids. I'm dreading it. And I don't want to see those things yet, but I know that today the car started. I know that today I'm going to a job. The car's heater works, even though it's cold outside. I knew for a while that afterwards I would go to my second job. How on earth was I able to land 2 jobs like this? And I couldn't explain it. That is a miracle to me. I have one last verse for you. This one right here is on John 4:46 through 54. If you have Bible, you can find it. You don't have to though. I'll read it here. This is when Jesus has already turned water into wine, and he's done all these miraculous signs and wonders and that kind of thing. But this person that comes to talk to him acted a lot like I did. As he traveled through Galilee, Jesus came to Canaan, where he had turned water into wine. There was a government official in nearby Capernaum whose son was very sick. When he heard that Jesus was coming from Judea to Galilee, he went and he begged Jesus to come to Capernaum to heal his son who was about to die. That guy assumed a couple things. First of all, he assumed that Jesus had to be in the same room as his son to heal him. Jesus is God. God can do whatever he wants. He did exactly what I did. He laid his plans out and said, this is what needs to happen. You need to come here. You need to do this. You need to lay your hands on him or do whatever magic thing that you do, and he will be healed. He believed that Jesus could do it, which was the first step. That's a great step. But he also assumed things that I assumed. He assumed that God has to do it on my terms, which, if you say those kind of things to God, of course, he is going to expand your face. This is what happened. Jesus said, will you never believe in me unless you see miraculous signs and wonders? And I always thought that was a harsh thing to say to a guy whose child was dying, but I think he's more explaining the human condition. This is us. We'll never believe in him unless we see miraculous signs and wonders. That's kind of where miracles come in. He knows that we're very visual learners in that respect. The official pleaded, Lord, please come now before my little boy dies. Then Jesus told him, go back home. Your son will live. And the man, he expanded his faith. Watch this. The man believed what Jesus said and started to go home. Verse 51. While the man was on his way, some of his servants met with him, with the news that his son was alive and well. He asked them when the boy had begun to get better, and they replied, yesterday afternoon at 1 o'clock, his fever disappeared. Then the father realized that that was the very time Jesus had told him, your son will live. And this is where miracles come in, the next sentence. And he and his entire household believed in Jesus. You and I need to be telling our stories. I need to be telling people about this. We don't like talking about financial things as Americans. I needed to tell you this today, and I need to tell as many people as I can, especially at my work. God's been convicting me about some people that are in kind of the same situation I need to talk to. But I need to tell them that exact story, because miracles, it help us kind of project our faith. If you don't believe me, look at what happened here. See if you can explain this. And most likely people will have an explanation for it. Stephen Hawking always did. But in the end, even though people might have an explanation for it, it does chip away at doubt just a little bit, doesn't it? To hear so many stories of unexplained things happening. Eventually, chance begins to look a little bit silly. If you have won the lottery chance-wise that many times, how is it not a miracle? And so that's my last question here with us. First of all, miracles enhance our story and shape our ministry. But my question for myself this week, I'm sorry I've gone over time. Do I limit God the same way that the official did when I should be, in fact, celebrating all these signs and miracles? So I'll leave you with that today. Let's pray. God, I thank you for all the things that I know have come to mind with everybody in this room today, of times when it's unexplained and sometimes unvalued that you have just done something that needed to be done. And God, I pray that this week, that we would try this for a week, that we would just, the people that come to us that are in sort of the same circumstances, that we would share some of these stories, because these stories are kind of what make